Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? I'm going to sit down because I'm quite pregnant. So I'm Anna, I'm from Rareminds. I'm a child and adolescent psychotherapist by training, and at Rareminds I work with parents, carers, adults affected by different conditions. So who are we? We are the first specialist mental health third sector organisation for the rare disease community. Our founder's been working as a psychotherapist for those impacted by rare diseases since 2013, and we're a growing team. So we actually launched in October 2020. We work with 2 charities. This year we're up to 15 charities that we work with, and we've got 9 counsellors, psychotherapists, professionals, and we work online. So we do lots of different things. Couples and individual counselling, group programmes, different workshops. We do training and support, so we offer clinical supervision for healthcare professionals, frontline workers, and we also take part in research and awareness, so we can provide and build data for sort of to help charities get extra funding for things, for us to get extra funding as well. We work a lot with National Lottery, and we're about to launch with the Rare Care Centre in Wales as well. Which some of you might have heard of. So one of our sort of main practices is that the idea that there is no physical health without mental health, and they're impacted by each other. So poor mental health impacts on physical health, and physical health impacts on mental health. So those who live with poor physical health live with higher rates of depression, anxiety, stress management, and all of those things obviously have an impact on diet, sleep, relationships, which then have an impact on your mental health. So it's this cycle that we see all the time. You can sort of see from the slides that this is just sort of research that backs up what we're saying, and that Rareminds, we work on the basis that not everyone in our team works with all charities. So for example, I work with BBS directly, but I don't work with maybe some of the cancer charities. So if you are someone who is accessing Rareminds through BBS, I have knowledge of what it means to live with BBS because I've done the training, I've attended meetings with them, which is not something that you get everywhere else. And lots of people who access the NHS services or other mental health services have said that there's poor disease awareness leads to poor outcomes in counselling and therapy because they feel not understood. We are able to say, okay, yes, you're having problems in your relationship and you're impacted by living with this condition every single day. So what makes rare conditions so challenging to mental well-being? A lengthy traumatic diagnosis leads to reduced trust in healthcare professionals. It can be years and years before people are diagnosed properly, and it can be traumatic to go through maybe not being believed or through testing time and time again. Some of the testing can be quite traumatic, especially if it's testing on children, that can have a massive impact on them. Low disease awareness, as I've already said, among professionals and the public, I'm sure a lot of you have had experience of you going to somewhere medical and you say, okay, this is what we're dealing with, and they go, what's that? Never heard of that. And you have to be the one to explain, and that can leave you feeling incredibly isolated and frustrated. Multiple uncertainties, you've got macro and micro uncertainties, so everyone lives with the macro uncertainties about the economy, the government, the state of the world, kind of what's going on at the minute, the worries about America and the wars and all of that. But then you also live with the micro uncertainties about what is the next day going to look like, what is the next hour going to bring. And I think as a group you live with that in a much more intense way than people who are not affected by a condition. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that all the time there's things going round and round in your mind that other people just aren't dealing with. You've got the high logistical and financial burden of disease care and management as well. Maybe you've had to stop work, maybe you've had to give up your job. Maybe there's logistics of getting to specialist centres, hospitals, clinics that are not near you, and that can all cause stress. Strain on family life, relationships, couples. You know, you're dealing with things, although you're a family unit, you're dealing with things very differently because you're individuals within the family unit. Maybe one of you wants to talk all the time and the other doesn't. You know, maybe one person wants to have all the information and maybe the other person says, do you know what, we'll just deal with what comes when it comes. And that can cause a lot of strain. I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a lot and I'm sure you'll recognise them. So, mental health in young people and rare conditions. So globally, 1 in 7 10 to 19-year-olds experience mental health difficulties. So this is 13% of the global burden of disease in this age group. Depression, anxiety and behavioural changes are amongst the leading side effects of illness and disability amongst adolescents. And suicide is the fourth most common cause of death amongst 15 to 29-year-olds. So it's massive. You know, suicide in this age group is massive. And we'll talk about why that is on the next slide. So the teenage brain. You know, teenagers are a bit of an anomaly, aren't they? They're a bit strange beings. They do strange things. So we have this bit at the front of our brain here. If you put your hand across, that's kind of where it sits. Kind of comes around here, and that's called the prefrontal cortex. All children are born without this part of their brain. If they were born with it, birth just couldn't happen because their heads would be too big, right? So they're born without it, and you have to develop it. And this is the part of your brain that says, don't kick that toddler, don't throw the hot coffee on that woman. You know, like it stops you doing the impulsive things that you might come into your brain as a quick thought, but then you dismiss them, right? So remember, teenagers and children don't have this part of their brain. And you might notice if you've had very young children and if you've had teenagers and toddlers are very similar, because what happens is in toddlerhood and teenagehood, the prefrontal cortex goes through a very similar stage of development. It's making all those connections, and essentially, to make those connections, it just shuts off. It stops working at all. So you might have 7-year-olds to kind of 10-year-olds who seem to know everything. They've got all the answers to everything, and that's because their prefrontal cortex has gone through this process of development, and they're kind of there, and they can do it. And then they hit puberty, and it goes again, because they have got impact of hormones, of new relationships, moving schools, friendships, and it just kind of switches off. And it's why teenagers do silly things. But this means that we cannot treat children and teenagers like small adults. They have to be treated differently. And they can't do the logic things that we can do. And if you've ever tried to reason with a teenager or a toddler and give them logic, you'll see that it just doesn't work, because logic comes from this prefrontal cortex. We can do it, we can be reasoned with, but maybe if you're really angry, you can't. And that's because it shuts off. It's the part of our brain that shuts off, it's the part that goes to sleep. So, like I said, it's got a lot going on. It stops growing in size in early adolescence, but it kind of continues to fine-tune up until late 20s. For women, it's 25. For men, it's 28. So that might give you a little bit of insight as well into the difference between men and women. The amygdala is in overdrive, so it's got a heightened sense of awareness of emotions and responses without the support of the prefrontal cortex. So your amygdala is responsible for keeping yourself safe. It's your stress response, essentially, but it's got no logic to back anything up. So what is an adolescent and teenager? They are in-betweeners, aren't they? They are not one thing or another. They're a little bit odd. So they're a bundle of hormones plus whatever condition they're living with. So in your case, BBS. You're not always able to predict their actions, and they are useless at predicting consequences of anything, ever. And they will try to emotionally separate from you as parents and carers whilst being incredibly dependent. Yeah, I can do this myself, I don't need you, go away, shut up. Can you drive me into town, please? Yeah, can you buy this for me? Can you buy that for me? But leave me alone. Don't ask me what I'm doing, don't talk to me about my friends. I don't want to know you until I need you. They're occasionally infuriating and often delightful. I love teenagers, I think they're hilarious, but they are so frustrating, so frustrating. So what's going on? They are fine-tuning this balance between dependence and independence. And it's very, very difficult when you've got a teenager who lives with a condition because their level of independence might not match up to their chronological age. It actually matches up to their kind of emotional and cognitive age. That's all right. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to talk to teenagers, how to manage teenagers. But it comes with the caveat of this can apply to children too. And this is about how we manage transition with children and teenagers. But it has to be appropriate for what your child can do. So it might be that your child can do 5 things on the list and one other they might struggle with, or it might be that they can only do 1 thing on the list. That doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter what their ability is. We can still help them with transition. It's not all about being able to eloquently advocate for themselves. There are other ways that they can do it. So the tips are kind of, I'll give you some tips and then I'll sort of talk about how we might get around some things if they find communication difficult, or if they're physically impaired, and how we can get around things like that. So try to talk with, not at. And one of the things that teenagers find most difficult is this kind of direct eye contact, this, I'm going to sit opposite you and I'm going to talk to you. Oh, they hate it. They're like shy away, they don't like it at all. So one of our best tips is have a conversation side by side, child or teenager, take them out for a walk, go out for a drive in the car, sit side by side doing something. Maybe you're doing a puzzle, maybe you're playing a game on their iPad, maybe you're colouring. But that side by side allows them to emotionally regulate themselves. It allows them to disengage a little, and it's not so intense for them. Adults often like direct eye contact and like to sit opposite someone and talk, but it's not always necessary. And sometimes for children, it's actually impossible for them to do that. Try not to attack or criticise. You've done this and you need to do better. So easy. And it's so much harder not to criticise. Have you thought about, would it be better if? Let's have a think together. Listen to their perspective. So often children don't feel listened to, right? Because they're told what to do all the time. They're told what to do at school, they're told what to do in healthcare, they're told what to do at home. They don't get a lot of choice in anything. And if we can allow our children a space where they feel listened to, you don't have to take on all their suggestions, because some of them will be silly because the brain's not developed. But if you can allow them to feel that they're listened to, that will help the conversation move along and it will stop them being so defended. So say less, listen more. Behave like the adult. It can be so easy to go into that childhood place, especially with teenagers, when they're doing something that's just infuriating you, and it can be so easy to feel like you're losing your temper and, to go into that teenage place yourself. But taking a step back, remembering you are the grown-up, you are the adult, you are the one that sets the boundaries and you're the one that's in charge. And they need you to be in charge. They need boundaries, they need consequences. Be available. If you can't be available, because we can't all of the time, give them a time when you can be available. Yeah, if you're in the middle of trying to cook dinner, walk the dogs, put the washing on, whatever, maybe that's not the time for the conversation. But letting them know, at this time, we can sit down and have a talk about this. Why don't you go away and write down what you want to talk about, and then after dinner, we can sit down and talk about it. Rather than, not now, I'm too busy, I can't do that. Or trying to kind of half be in the conversation, half do what you're doing, giving them a time where they can come back. It doesn't have to be a parent that they talk to. It can be another trusted adult. There will be people at school. If they do clubs outside of school, they can talk to someone who runs the clubs, they can talk to healthcare professionals, they can talk to a counsellor, they can talk to another family member maybe, somebody who feels appropriate. So I think it's really important to remember that transition is a process and not an event. So a bit like the TCASH video was saying, that transition is not going from primary school to secondary school, and it's not going from children's services to adult services. That is the transition, but it doesn't have to start then. So when can you start? Our suggestion would be to engage children and teenagers as early as possible with their transition. And it may need a long run up, and it might need to be done at different paces. So there might be some children who can do it in a year, and there might be some children who can do it in 9 years. It doesn't matter how long it takes. You know your child best, you know what's going to work, you know what they're going to need. So you can start that process early. It needs to be personalised to your child, and again, you know what they're going to need. And it will bring up lots of different emotions. You might feel anticipation, you might be looking forward to it, your child might be looking forward to it, there might be dread about moving away from child services to adult services, and there might be a combination of all of them. Try not to transfer in crisis, so after hospitalisation and emergencies, then is not the time to be thinking about how we're going to manage my child moving into adult services, because stress levels are too high. And when, like I've said before, when stress levels are high, this part of your brain shuts off, you can't do logic, you can't do reasoning, and teenagers and children will find it difficult anyway. And things can wait. It doesn't all have to be done in one go. It's about taking small steps. So when to start the conversation around moving teams? It's not a single conversation, but it's the beginning of multiple conversations. So maybe from the very first appointment where your child is able to understand that they go to appointments at the hospital, talking to them about when you are older, when you are a grown-up, you might change teams, even transitions, they might not see the same member of staff every time. People leave and new people join and things happen, being able to talk to them about it's not going to be the same every time. Float the idea of moving teams into the conversation in a light way. So just making it something normal that happens. It's not going to be a big event, it's not going to be traumatic, it's not going to be stressful, but it's something that's going to happen to you, and it happens to all children who are using services like this. Exploring the idea of change and giving time and space for your teenager to explore how they feel as well. They might, sometimes they might want to talk to you about it, sometimes they might say, I'm really scared, I don't want to, and that's okay, it's all right to say I don't want to and I'm scared. And other times they might say, yeah, okay, I feel like I can do it today. And then there's different things that you can do depending on how they feel about it. So they vary a lot. There's a lot of difference in teenagers. Trust that you know your teenager or child best. And like I said before, it's not about their age, it's about their understanding. So what can they do? And support your child to advocate for their own needs to the best of their ability. So the timing of transferring teams is very important. Who drives the transfer? What else is going on at the time? And is a joint meeting possible? Can you have a meeting with child services and adult services at the same time? Can they help with that transition? And it's something worth asking your healthcare team if they can do, if that's something that they support. With what else is going on at the time, how many of you have children with an EHCP? Okay, so when they hit year 9, and they have their year 9 annual review, they will have a preparation to adulthood meeting. Then is a really good time to start sort of thinking about the transition into adulthood, because that's what they're doing at school, that's what they're doing in social care, it's what they're doing in healthcare outside of their hospital team. So then it kind of makes it really normal that, okay, when I'm 14, I'm going to start thinking about, moving on, what am I going to do after school? How am I going to move into an adult services team? And that can be a really sort of nice, natural way to do it. So meeting the consultant. It's really important that your child kind of feels that they have some autonomy, I suppose, about what happens to them, because, children are just told you're going to do this and this is going to happen to you. So having a pre-prep talk with your teen about meeting their consultant, about who is their consultant, what's their name, first of all, what's their job, how can they talk to them? Can you give your teen a special notebook to help them write down questions? You can write down questions in there as well. You can help them write the answers to it. And when I say write, I don't mean you have to write long, laborious sentences. I mean, you can draw pictures together You can stick photographs in of what's going to happen. You know, you can use visual timetables, comic strip conversations. It doesn't need to be written, you know, it doesn't need to be verbally coherent even, but involving them in how can they do it for themselves. Helping them to take the lead as well. So are there things that you can help them do to sort of prepare them to meet with their consultant? So can they do things like, can they look on the map to let you know what time you're going to need to leave to get to your appointment on time? You know, can they do that? Can they go through the post and identify which post has the NHS symbol on it that might be for them? You know, sort of starting them thinking about how they're going to manage their care in adulthood. Add reminders as necessary. Help them to ask questions. And you might like time together and time for your child alone with the consultant. And that's something to be negotiated with your child. So you can negotiate that at the start. You know, would you like to go in on your own to begin with? Do you want me to be there for the whole thing? Shall I come in for the last 10 minutes to help you ask any questions? You know, for them to give me any information. And sometimes your child might want to do it by themselves completely, and other times they might need you there. It's really important to have a debrief afterwards. How was that for you? How did that feel? Was there anything you found too hard? Was there anything that felt a lot easier than you thought it was going to feel?
Got 10 minutes, let's go through the rest of the slides.
No, we'll skip the next one. Okay, so contacts and appointments. So how does your child know how to contact their team if they can and if possible? The consistency of contact as well. Do they know sort of who to email, who to call, who to message? So they're not dealing with lots of different people in the team. And that's something you can ask the team as well. Is there one person that we can contact if we need you? Who to contact in an emergency, how to get test results, when to expect the next appointment, how to make and change appointments for tests, scans, clinics. This one is really important, especially if you've got teenagers, because there will be other things in their life that they want to do. It's not all about their condition. They might have sports days, they might have club events, they might have friends' birthday parties. Do they know how to ask you and how to ask their medical team? Actually, I can't make that appointment because there's something else that I want to do. Can we rearrange? Because all those things are really important as well. It's not just about their health condition, it's about everything. So yeah, you might need to talk to your teen about blood tests, MRIs, overnight stays. And becoming more apprehensive or needy is really normal. Your teen will go through this kind of backwards and forwards transition, and validating their emotional response. So I can understand that you feel scared about that. I can understand that this feels difficult. Why don't we work on it together? Doing it with them. It's not unusual for medication to become erratically managed by your teen. You know, their sleep schedule's all over the place, they're eating loads of weird things, they're doing weird things with their medication. Try to be supportive rather than confrontational. So can you set an alarm on your phone? You know, and then you can hear the alarm go off on their phone. Have you taken your medication? You know, just kind of that gentle prompting rather than you need to remember to do this and you haven't done that, and you know, because that will just make them more defensive. And allow for the impact as well. There's a big impact that happens around transition. So it's not unusual for your child to see more adult in children's services and more childlike in adult services. There will be grumpiness, tearfulness, withdrawals, tantrums, and these are all signs of insecurity about change. And teens who have managed illness well might have more questions now, because I think from talking to lots of different parents, one of the things that we often forget is if you've explained your child's medical condition to them when they're 5 or 6, we forget to continue to have that conversation. So when they're sort of 13 or 14, they kind of say, well, I thought I understood it, but I don't actually have that much information. I know what it's like to live with it, but I need more information now. Anxieties will be higher for both you and your teen for quite some time. There's been research done that shows that transition time is as stressful as diagnosis time, especially for parents, because it's that letting go, that allowing your child to take that step into independence when that might feel too hard. Yeah, you can go into the next one.
Oh, right. Just because of the timing element and everything being moved on, we've got about just under 10 minutes for questions. So I don't know if anybody has got any questions or any areas they want us to explore a little bit more. Yeah.
Is there any health, is there any support for teenagers who, for example, I know for my son, he hates hospitals because he ends up there a lot. He won't talk to any of the staff members, and it's been years that he's been in and out of the hospitals. So is there any support to try and get that across? Because all of those things are so valid. I don't see him doing it, and I don't see him transitioning, you know, in about 3 or 4 years' time. So how do we get him? I think he is capable of doing it. It's just how do we go from here to there?
There's a really good information pack on the Cerebra website about managing transition for children who are in situations like that, where hospital is just too stressful, too traumatic, and that's got it's got really good tips in there about sort of making relationships with just one person in the beginning in the hospital. So it becomes about going to see that one person, you know, rather than sort of the stress and trauma of ending up in hospital. You know, especially when they've got appointments, so kind of like forming those relationships. And then on that, in that information pack, they've got links to other websites. If you Google Cerebra, I think it's Cerebra UK charity transition leaflet, it will be the first one that comes up. That's really good. I think we've got it in our links at the end of this presentation, so it'll be there.
Thank you.
The other suggestion I've got is with your local services, if there's a local play therapist that maybe because obviously every young person's different, and having met your young man, he needs a very particular way of communicating with him. Maybe one of the local play therapists would come out and do some work to get to know him.
I don't think we've got that service available in our area, but also with him, we've been under like 3 or 4 different hospitals.
Yeah.
And the only one lay specialist that he's really dealt with is the one in Birmingham.
Yeah.
She's the only one who he will say hello to, he can talk to, he literally no one else. And I think even they do have play specialists, but they sort of, everyone sort of looks at him and goes, he's far too complex. And then if they've got anxiety, then they can't really, they're lovely, but they can't really get him to talk or communicate. And that process alone, if they're going to keep trying, I mean, it's been 2 years and he play Uno with them now, after 2 years, but he won't do anything else. As soon as it comes to talking about his emotions or how he's feeling or can he do this, he just shuts off completely.
And it, yeah. Yeah.
Something that's worked for us is Jemima goes to the Royal Flying School up in Edinburgh, and they have a mindfulness program which works on the senses and calming, and it's really helped her relax and express herself a lot more than she has done in the past. She's 19 now, and she's under a lot of anxiety about transitioning, hopefully to rural RNC, but we're still having a funding battle, so there's a lot of anxiety there. But she has also got a social worker that does use mindfulness techniques, and she's bonded really well with her, so that's helped us. And
Yeah, and you know, it might be worth talking to the teams as well, the child team and the adult team, because I've worked with people before who are 29 still in child services because they can't make that transition at 18. You know, and their hospital is able to facilitate that, so it's worth having the conversation about it.
Is there any other questions? No? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I hope you found that informative. So thank you very much from both of us.